It is opt-in, and so we hope that it's a compelling offer that it gives you, a department would no longer need to pay for professional system administration or no administration. It might be. We hope that it's a compelling enough offer that and meets most people's needs that it'll be compelling in itself to be able to switch over to using the filer, and we can decommission your department file server. If you have a department file server and you already have created groups on your file server, and let's say they're just on that server itself, they're not in the campus directory, we'll work with you to recreate those in Workgroup Manager, and then that'll give you a web interface to control those workgroups forevermore yourself, and the filer will transfer your data over. One of the trickier things about accessing, I know, of like accessing drive.google is that, and I hope I don't show it. It's logged in as you. So a lot of us already have Gmail accounts, right? Or we have Google accounts already. You have to be cognizant that when you want to access your Stanford stuff, you have to toggle over and say, I'm now my Stanford and I'm accessing Google versus my personal Gmail account and I'm accessing Google. So you do that by clicking on here. And you see that Jessica already has a Gmail account and then her Stanford account. If we logged in her at here, you'll see that it looks a little differently. Here's your Stanford logo, and here's the Stanford Google. So here's the difference between those. So here's the Google one for her personal stuff, and here is her, I hope I'm not, and then this is her Stanford one. But yes, staff, students, faculty all have access to Google Apps. AFS is something that's been around on campus for a very long time. A lot of people find that it is clunky to work with. The AFS, you have to either launch a special tool like Fetch we have on Macs, in order to access AFS, or you have to download and install the AFS tool and install it on your Mac to navigate it to something on your desktop. The filer, you don't have to do either of those. You can connect to the filer like you would a file server. In terms of functionality, there's some technology in the back that makes AFS behave a little differently. AFS is difficult to work with off campus, for example, especially on laptops. And if you bring your laptop home, you'll have to fire up an extra application like Fetch or do things by command line. But there are some really great use cases for AFS for folks who, especially research computer or Linux, that use AFS for different purposes. One key similarity, though, is that with AFS, you can go back to snapshots just like you can with a filer. So in that sense, it functions much the same way in that you can roll back to previous versions. But I think that the filer is intended to be much more user-friendly to deal with. It depends. Generally, it's been pretty easy. So we do a lot of the work setting everything up for you, and we'll even help you transfer the data, and that's really simple. You just kind of connect to the old one, connect to the new one, and drag your data over, and eventually it just kind of comes over. Where it can get kind of harried is when you have all sorts of wackadoodle permissions where you say, this person can access this folder, they can't access this daughter folder, but they can access this folder over here, and you get this rat's nest of different permissions. So we'll help, and CRC desktop folks will help with kind of unteasing that and simplifying things. But the groups that we've transitioned over, we did a lot of work in the background, and then we just said, on this day, sometime in the afternoon, let's just stop working on the old server. We've already transferred your data over, so we're going to do one tiny little catch-up to make sure we have the latest data. And then starting in an hour, you'll just work off the new server. And then, should be pretty easy. It would be difficult to give access to the intern to the special folder. I wish I had a whiteboard, because these are the kind of things you kind of want to. So let's say you have a parent folder, and we'll call it, I don't know, data. And then underneath it, you have a folder that's the only folder that you want the intern to have access to, and none of this other stuff. You would have to get rather clever by giving that intern the ability on the filer to go into the folder, but not look at anything. The better thing to do is to take that folder out and just move it over here, and then the intern will have access to this folder, and then you could give read-only access to the data folder if that's what you want. But I would keep it simple. No, they can't kind of navigate by tweaking around URLs. So they can't kind of go up a URL tree. That Box won't allow that. That's one of the reasons why those URLs are gigantically long, is because it's not a traditional file server where you can kind of traverse up to the parent directory by editing like in a browser window. It doesn't work quite like that. But you cannot share things if you have a form that you want the public to access that's in a folder in your Box folder, or maybe your workgroups Box folder. You can't give the public access to that URL unless they also have access to the entire folder. So in this instance, I would pull out that special form. I'd create a folder, maybe you could call it publicly accessible forms, and put that form in that folder. Because if you give me a URL and say, hey, Noah, I want you to fill out this form, but I don't have access to the parent folder at all, I won't have access to that URL either. When you are sharing things with collaborators by sending them an email with a URL, again, you can share things in Box with anybody who has an email address. Your mother-in-law, you could send her pictures of stuff. Unless she has access to that parent folder, she won't be able, she'll click on that link, but it'll just deny her. So the best thing to do is just create an extra folder called Things I Want to Share with My Mother-in-Law, and put your stuff in there, and then, or Things I Want to Share with the Public, and make it readable to anybody. That would be the best way to handle that one. I think you're referring to this right here. Is that right? Yeah. Right. So Mailman, which is the name of our email group email distribution server, Mailman, the technology, that's what this is. You can create a workgroup linkage with Mailman. So rather than going to the Mailman interface and adding individuals in your organization, you could use the workgroup integration tool here, and this will replace whatever is in Mailman. And forevermore, you can manage who's going to be subscribing to your Mailman list by using Workgroup Manager. So this is a great way. I mean, the value of using Workgroup integration is that when you start linking your Box group and your Google group and on the other services, you just have one stop. You just add that person to that one group, and they're added to your Mailman list. They're added to your Box share. They're added to your Google group, all in one big fell swoop, which is kind of cool. You have to do it on a Windows machine because it's the only thing that will integrate with the directory system in order to see the workgroups. CRC desktop folks will help guide you through that, but it's not difficult. It's just beyond what our presentation is. So you would bring up a Windows system. You would connect to it via Windows. You navigate to the folder that, maybe it's the finance folder. You can right-click on it, and then you can add on whatever workgroup you've pre-configured in Workgroup Manager and give that and add that to the list of groups that have access to it. Only for what I'm going to call moderate to low risk kind of data. That's confidential. It might be your department, it might be salary, it might be that kind of stuff, but nothing that if it got out in the public and somebody broke into it, I'd have to call Kamala Harris and explain, what went on. That kind of data is perfectly fine for the filer and for Box, but not Social Security numbers, credit cards, and that kind of stuff.